Hi, Phyllis here. I wanted to share some stories with you this morning from 1949, 1950. I guess we lived very much like other people lived. My father had worked in the shipyard during the war, and the war was over, and they had saved a bunch of money, enough to build a house, so we moved back to North Carolina from Virginia. And we, I guess, stayed with my grandparents probably for a few weeks till we could find a place to live. And my daddy and my uncle formed, I guess, a sawmill company or lumber company. And Daddy wanted the house to be built with heart pine lumber. So he and my uncle proceeded to cut timber and sell it, I guess, and then he would save back what he wanted to use to build our home. So while he was doing all this, we had to have somewhere to live. And as I said, I think we lived with my grandparents probably just a few weeks until they found a place for us to live. And this home was a shack. Okay, it really was. It was kind of a dump. You could tell that the house was probably 50 years old, and probably had been built at the turn of the century. It was 3 rooms, a kitchen, a little living area, and then 1 bedroom off of that area. And it was on land that was also connected to my grandparents' land. The creek was what divided the 2 properties. And the weeds were all grown up around it, and I'm not sure if it had a well originally or the people that lived there in the beginning maybe got their water from a creek, because the creek wasn't that far away. But I remember the dirt being piled up where they had dug the well, so I'm thinking maybe they dug the well just before we moved in. Anyway, there was no electricity, and we had an outhouse, and the house was the dark wood, when wood has never been painted and it's turned dark. Well, this wood was really, really dark. And I remember it only had 1 door in, and that door kind of led in to the kitchen on the right, and then the living room area, and then there was a bedroom area off that. So, before we moved in, Mother decided the house needed to be really cleaned up, and it was wood. Everything on the inside was wood. The ceilings were wood, the floor wood, the walls were wood. And so she hired a lady from Eagle Springs, a black lady, who I guess was about Mother's age, and she came in, and her and Mother proceeded to put lye water, I guess, on all the walls, everything. And I remember me and my older sister had to stand in the doorway, and we could watch them, and they were throwing buckets of this water they had boiled up on the walls, and of course it was all over the floor and everything too. And I guess that's what sanitized the place. I'm not sure why they were doing all that, but so we got the house clean, and we moved in with a small amount of furniture. I remember a kitchen and a table and just 2 chairs in the kitchen, and a couch and maybe a chair in the living room, and then just the bedroom. I guess me and my sister slept on the floor because I don't remember there being but 1 bed there. And so we lived there, and it was within walking distance of my grandparents' home. You had to go kind of down the hill, over the creek, and then up through the back part of their property, which was all woods, and then from there you would enter that back really big field where they always grew the wheat, and then you could come up behind the barn on their property, and then from there, of course, the house wasn't far away at all. So while we were living in this house, somehow we ended up with a little pig, a little young pig. And he was like a pet. He was like a dog, really. We used to play with him all the time, and he would follow us around, and me and my sister we loved him. So when we would walk over to my grandparents' house, you had to kind of walk down the hill. Then, of course, it was woods there, and then where the creek was located, you'd have to go down the embankment, and then there was a big log across the creek, so the creek was maybe 4 or 5 feet wide. You couldn't really jump across it, and the water moved pretty fast in that creek. So my mother and sister and I would walk that log to get across the creek, so we could go to Grandma's house. And I remember that little pig would follow us all the way down to the creek. And then when we would start across the log, of course he couldn't walk across, he was afraid. And he would stand on that bank and just holler and holler and holler because we had left him. And so we would get all the way through all those woods. You could still hear him just screaming on the other side of the creek. But anyway, eventually, of course, the pig grew up and somebody slaughtered him. I don't know who, but one day the pig was gone. And I remember my mother talking about the pig because she really liked him too, and said that once he was slaughtered, she couldn't eat any of the meat. It just kind of broke her heart to even be eating any of the meat. So anyway, that was the little pig, and he was gone, and that was that. So Daddy was still working the business, the lumber business, and accumulated enough to build our house. Now the house was pretty big. It was 2 stories, had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom downstairs, kitchen, dining room, living room, and then it had enough area upstairs for 2 more bedrooms. And of course it had a big back porch. So Daddy had accumulated enough hard pine lumber to build the home. But we were still living in this little rinky-dink shack, really is what it was. And one day Mother was in the kitchen, and my sister and I were in the living room area playing paper dolls. Now, back in the 50s, you could get these they were like little comic books, but they had paper dolls in them, and you would cut the paper dolls out and the little clothes so you could change their outfits, and you'd have the little paper doll, and you'd kind of fold the paper back, and the little dress would stay on, and we played that all the time. And so that's what we were doing that day. And all of a sudden, my mother just screamed to the top of her lungs. And of course, we went running to the door that led into the kitchen to see what was going on. And of course, she immediately said, we're leaving. And so she just kind of jerked us up, and we were out the door. And Mama was all nervous and shaky. And finally, she told us there was a snake in the little pantry area. Now, the kitchen was very primitive, and it had a little area, though, where you could, there were shelves, and it was almost like a little closet. And then Mother had put a curtain up over it. And so she had pulled the curtain back to get a dish towel out, because she kept her canned goods and the dish towels and dishes, too, in that little closet area that had all the little shelves. So she had reached in to get a dish towel and just pull the curtain slightly back. And there was a big copperhead snake all coiled up, ready to strike. And of course it didn't bite her. But we left and of course went to my grandmother's house. And then I don't remember ever being back in that house again. Maybe we were and I just don't remember it. But my next memory, we were living in another little rental house till Daddy finished the big house. So Mama, of course, didn't like snakes. I mean, who does, really? And certainly the copperhead was a poisonous snake, and I think she was probably afraid for us to be in there, and certainly afraid to sleep in there, and because it was an old house, and it didn't really have any underpinning, and it didn't even have any subfloor. It was just pieces of wood for the floor, and even the walls were the rough cut lumber. But we knew we were just staying there temporarily until Daddy got the house finished. So that was my story of the snake that was in the pantry and our little pet pig that we loved. And so anyway, that took place in, I'm guessing now, 1949. I was like 4 years old in 1950. And then we moved to another house, and this house didn't have snakes. It also had indoor plumbing, so it was a lot better, but we only stayed in the next house just a few months because Daddy had finished the home he was building. We were able to move in there. Okay, so I'll be back with another story.